This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional, medical, or any other type of advice. As a listener, you must use your own judgment and interpretation when applying the content of this podcast. Hey. Welcome to Boldly Authentic with Cynthia Fontaine. I am Cynthia Fontaine, and I am so happy to be here with you, listening wherever you are in the world. This is a really exciting time for me because I have got a team that is phenomenal. They are just doing the most amazing things, helping me with this podcast and other things, and I'm going to talk about them throughout the show and probably throughout this whole entire season. This is episode 3 that you are listening to of Boldly Authentic. And in the first 2 episodes, I talked about a lot about your intuition. What is it? How do you find it? How do you use it? And one of the things that I mentioned in episode 2 was how to find your secret intuitive meter. I also call it your truth meter as well. So I will refer to it as other things depending on the context of the conversation. But so if you have heard me in the past say you're in a truth meter, your secret intuitive meter is really the same thing. Some of the other things that I've talked about in previous shows were what blocks your intuition, right? Negative thinking, being around toxic people, not moving your body, you're not getting fresh air, right? When I had shattered my leg and ankle in a fall, I was in a wheelchair for 4.5 months. And it was during COVID. My daughter was still working in the office at work because it was only a 2-person office and each person had their own separate space. So I was home by myself all day long, and the days became really long where I didn't see people, for the whole entire day, except for one of my friends would come in every day to make sure that I had something for lunch. So I had a different friend that would come every day. And it was the most challenging, but also the most wonderful time in my life as well, because those friends who are so dear to me took time out of their busy lives to come and make sure that I was okay. And so I had, one friend would come on Tuesday, another friend would come on Wednesday, and they sort of all just picked a day of the week so that I would be sure to have somebody at least for part of the day while I was here. But one of the things that was the most difficult was I couldn't get outside on my own. So I was so desperate to get out into fresh air and into nature. I would wheel my wheelchair to the front door, and I would sit there with the door opened with my legs sticking out because I had to have my leg elevated with a special, lift on the wheelchair. And I would just sit there with the door open with my legs sticking out the door. It was probably pretty hilarious for people that passed by that, didn't know who I was or what happened or whatever. Of course, my neighbors were aware, but it was probably pretty hilarious for people who saw me just sitting at the door with my legs sticking out the door. But those moments, breathing in the fresh air, just being in nature as much as I could possibly be at that time, was a saving point for me. So it's so important that for your intuition, for your mental well-being, right, to get out there into nature, whatever temperature you like or time of day or night, just get out there. I will often at night, go out and stand or sit on my porch. Even in the wintertime, if it can be 20 degrees out, I don't care. But I'll go out there just for a few minutes and just take in what's around me, the beauty that's around me. Now, I live on a really busy road, so it's not like I'm out in the woods or anything like that, because you might be thinking, well, I live in a city, I live in a really busy place. How do you enjoy it? Well, you enjoy it just because you can breathe the air and you can be out in it wherever it is. And I get it. Some places, maybe the air isn't so good or whatever. So go outside your area if it's not so great. Find a nice, grove, a path of trees, a field, a park or something, and go take a walk, right? Go take a walk. So even though I'm on a really, really busy street, I don't let that interrupt my enjoyment of getting some beautiful fresh air. And the fresh air, really sort of livens up your senses. And your intuition is really like your five senses on, I don't want to say overload, but it's your five senses amped up. That's really what it is. Your five senses amped up. And so you want to do what you can to amp up those senses in a natural way, as the most natural ways as possible. Some of the things that dampen those senses are, again, negative thinking, toxic people around you, being dehydrated. Believe it or not, when you have like 10 or 15 minutes of brain work, where you're focusing on work, on a project, it's, maybe you're working on a new class, or you have a deadline for work, 10 to 15 minutes, your brain is dehydrated after that short period of time. So super, super key, drink water throughout the day, where even if you're taking like sips of water throughout the day, that helps you to stay hydrated. Funny thing, one of the things that really blocks your intuition is, are you a bit headstrong? I can be. I'll admit I can be a bit headstrong, and that can get in the way of blocking your intuition. So when you think about intuition, think of it as flow, right? So if you are on, say, a river, right? The water flows on the river, and sometimes it can get quite rough. But if you go to a pond, the water is it's still, it's more stagnant, right? So when you are headstrong, think of it like the pond, right? Where it's still, it's not really moving, not a lot going on. But then you think of the river, and the river is always flowing. It flows in as the tide flows in. It flows out as the tide flows out. And when you're flexible and you're moving and you're open to possibilities, your intuition flows more easily as you allow. All right. So, really interesting thing that I just saw this past week was an interview with Steven Spielberg. And I was really impressed by what he had to say. I had no idea that intuition was such a big part of his life. And I want to read exactly what he said in this interview, because I find it to be so helpful, right? Steven Spielberg is intuitive. Yes, not only is he intuitive, he says that we should all listen to our intuition. So here is the little snippet of the interview. Steven Spielberg says, "I didn't know who I was. How could I? How could any of us? For the first 25 years of our lives, we're trained to listen to the voices that are not our own. Parents and professors fill our heads with wisdom and information, and then employers and mentors take their place and explain how the world really works. Usually these voices of authority make sense, but sometimes doubt creeps into our heads and into our hearts. Even when we think, that's not quite how I see the world, it's kind of easier just to nod and agree and to go along. For a while, I let that going along to find my character. I was repressing my own point of view because, like in that Nelson song, everybody was talking at me, so I couldn't hear the echoes of my mind. At first, the internal voice I needed to listen to was hardly audible, and it was hardly noticeable, kind of like me in high school. Then I started paying more attention, and my intuition kicked in. I want to be clear that your intuition is different from your conscience. They work in tandem, but there is a distinction. Your conscience shouts, "Here's what you should do." You could also say ego in that place as well. While your intuition whispers, "Here's what you could do." Listen to that voice that tells you what you could do. Nothing will define your character more than that. He also went on to say that he taught his kids to listen to their still small voice, their intuition, because when you follow your intuition, you follow and find your heart. I just thought that was so profound coming from Steven Spielberg, the brilliant author that he is and storyteller who learned how to tap into his intuition. So, see, we all have intuition. People think, "Oh, I'm not intuitive." Well, yes, you are. You are intuitive. You don't have to work as an intuitive to have your intuition or to learn how to use your intuition and to learn how to really build your muscle of intuition. We all have it. Each one of us has a different layer, if you will, of how we express what we want to bring forth into the world. But when we use our intuition to move forward, and no matter what we bring out into the world, then it's going to come from a deeper place. It's coming from a knowing place. It'll be coming from a guided place. And you 99% of the time will be more happy with the results. I want to, sort of add a little disclaimer here, if you will, about the difference between following your intuition and giving your power away. So you can give your power away, for example, if you were to go to an intuitive, if you were going to go to a tarot card reader, if you were going to go to a psychic, and this psychic tells you XYZ, and you hang on every word of it, and you focus on just that and no possibilities of anything else. And then maybe you go back to that person a week or 2 or 3 weeks later, maybe even a month later, and you keep repeating, or you go back a little bit too frequently. This is where you would be giving your power away over to the other person, okay? Because that is coming from outside of you. Now, intuition comes from inside of you. It's your higher knowing. It's your higher self, which is connected to the divine possibilities that are out there all around us. I am often asked, how do you know what is intuition and what is just guessing? And I talked a little bit about that in one of the previous episodes, where how do you know it's intuition or if it's just wishful thinking? Well, you can ask for a sign from spirit to confirm that the information that you're feeling is your intuition. another thing also that I did mention in a previous podcast was listen to your body, because you will feel intuition viscerally in your body. You'll feel it in your gut. You'll feel it in your, like the sides of your neck will get tight. It's like, you'll just know, I know this is what I'm supposed to do. I know this is the house I'm supposed to buy. I talked about my house story in the last podcast. And but you can ask for signs, right? When I was buying another car about, 4 or 5 years ago, I think 5 years ago now, I wasn't sure that it was the right car for me, because it was a pretty big car, size wise and financially wise. And I thought, oh gosh, this car it's a fancy car. It's going to come with fancy repair bills. And is this the right car for me? Now, I felt like it was, because this car kept coming around and around, and I kept seeing this car over and over again. And I thought, okay, that's some sign from Spirit that maybe I should take a look at this car. And so I thought, I don't know. So what I did was, the brakes on the car that I had an Audi A6 5-speed. No, it was a 6-speed. And I loved that car, but it had like 240,000 miles on it. It had seen better days. It was broken pretty regularly, and it got to the point where it just wasn't reliable anymore. And I was going to an event that I was presenting with a colleague, and my brakes started flashing the brake light. And when a light flashes on your dashboard, that means stop ASAP, because flashing means urgent. So I pull off the highway, and I called my mechanic, and he advised me, with how to proceed. And so I was so mad, because I had been looking for a car for 6 months, and I said to my guides, you need to find me a car, and you need to find me a car now. And so that night, I'm scrolling the marketplace online, looking for cars, and I see this one car that keeps coming up over and over and over again. And again, I thought, no, that car would be silly for me to buy. Anyway, so after I saw it like, I don't know, 5th or 6th time, I said, okay, I get it. You're trying to give me a sign. I don't want to see the sign, but I'm going to be open to the possibility that maybe I could at least take a look at this car. So I messaged the owner, and I said, hey, I'd like to come look at this car. He messaged me back at 2:30 in the morning. And I went, oh no. So what did I do? Did I message him right back and said, oh, great, let's set up a time? No, I panicked. I closed the computer, and I said, all right, you guys. I talk to my team all the time, my angels, my spirit guides, the whole shebang. I said, all right, you guys, if this is the car that is the best car for me, I want you to give me a sign that is so crystal clear I cannot deny it, because I'm good at denying signs. I will let you know, because you might be good at denying signs as well, right? And it's not until that cosmic 2x4 comes along and whaps me upside of the head where I go, okay, I was ignoring the signs. Next time I'll get it sooner. So rather than the cosmic 2x4 coming along, I decided to ask for the sign. And so 7:30 that morning, I woke suddenly from a dream that I was standing on the side of the road, and there was rescue vehicles all over the place, and the car was in a ditch, totaled, and the rescue personnel were saying, if I had been in any other car, I would have been dead. So I thought that was a pretty darn clear sign. I said, that's the car for me. I messaged the guy back that morning, went and saw the car at 11:30, and walked away with the car. And that was, 5 years ago. I love the car. It's been a joy to own. It's a joy to drive in. I feel so safe in the car. It's really was the best thing that I could have done. And it's interesting, though, because now my daughter needs her car replaced. And we're sort of on the fence about my car because even though it's a great car, it is getting older. And so we're looking for new cars again. And I will again ask for a sign if it's the right car or not. Now, when I bought my daughter's car, I just knew. As soon as we drove the car, we went out on a whim. One Saturday night, we were bored. And if you could imagine that, I don't know what we were doing, but there was nothing going on. So she was getting ready to go to college. She was in her senior year of high school. And she had bought a 1976 Dodge Aspen for her first car, which we love. She still has it this day. We drive it all the time. But, it's an old car. And I don't really like her driving it on the highway because people don't understand when you are driving a car like that, the people around you who have these new cars with fancy brakes and all that sort of thing, they don't realize that these old classic cars take longer to stop. So if somebody cuts you off, you could be in real trouble. And there's no airbags or anything like that. And the seatbelts are kind of janky, but that's the way they were in 1976. So on a whim, I said, hey, let's go for a ride down the auto strip because we live near what's called the Auto Mile. And we get in the car and we go off and we're driving and we pull into this one place. It's a pretty big dealer. And we, just for the heck of it, we test a couple of cars on the lot. And we were like, no, weren't really feeling it with any of them. And then the salesman says, well, can you drive a standard? And we both said, yeah, because I taught my daughter how to drive a standard car because I think it's a good idea to know how to drive a standard car. Now, there aren't a lot of stick shifts. Now, you actually have to special order them if you get a new car, and some cars you can't even get them in a stick shift. But I grew up, in a junkyard, on a farm. You learned how to drive everything. So he says, look, I have this car. It just came in 2 days ago. It's not even been through the garage yet. You want to take it for a spin? So we were like, what is it? So told us what it was. We were like, sure, why not? So we get in the car, take the car around the area where they, tell you to go drive. And we get back to the parking lot, and she's looking at me, and I'm looking at her. And we both go, yeah, this is the car. And we just went out on a whim. We had no plan on going car shopping that night. We weren't really car shopping. I only had in my mind that I really would have liked her to have a car that I felt was safer for her to go back and forth to school, for when she wanted to come home for a weekend. And we just went out on a whim. And when I said to my daughter, hey, you want to go look at cars? Sure. Something told me to go out and look at a car. What was that? It was my intuition. I followed it. She still has that car today, 13 years later. That car has been, so fabulous. It's been reliable. It's taken a beating on the farm when she worked at the farm, and it's been a workhorse. It's been a really, really brilliant car. But that car too is to the point where now it's 20 years old and it really needs to be replaced. So I drove the car last week, and as I hadn't driven the car in a while, and I said, my car had gone into the shop for a repair, and I said, well, I'm going to take, your car because I was going on the highway, so I didn't want to take the old antique. And so I'm driving along, and I feel this tiny vibration in the steering wheel at about 60 miles an hour, and I went, Now, she had just told me a couple of days before she was hearing a little bit of a clicking noise in the front end. So when it's a clicking, when you're turning the wheel, I know chances are 90% it's a CV joint. Yes, I'm a motorhead. I love cars. I grew up around cars. All my family is mechanics. So I spent a lot of time around cars. So I know a little bit, know my way around a garage a little bit. Although these newer cars are a little bit above, my pay grade, if you will. So I hear, slow down. And I was going the speed limit. And it was so interesting because I actually had to slow down because there was a funeral procession in the middle lane of the 3-lane highway going 40 miles an hour. And everybody on the highway slowed down. So I was literally going 40 miles an hour. Get to the destination, and I thought, maybe I should go the opposite way home and take the city road, the country roads instead of going the highway. Anyway, I get back home and I said, honey, this car needs to go to the garage. There's a serious problem with the front end of this car. So takes it into the garage. And, it's interesting when you have a little bit of knowledge around cars and you add intuition to that, it really is helpful. Thank goodness we took the car in because it did need front end repair. And as, we're standing there talking to the mechanic when I went to go pick the car up, we said, I think we're going to sell the car and this is what we think we're going to ask for it. And he went, what, are you crazy? He's like, that car is highly sought after. You can get triple that amount. He says, go look it up on the internet when you get home. Sure enough, I go and look it up. And cars with more mileage, same year as hers, was going for more than triple of what we were going to ask for the car. So that really worked out well. And it wouldn't have come up in conversation had I not stayed and talked to the mechanic. My daughter and I both went because somebody needed a ride to pick up her car. And I said, well, you take the Dodge and I'm going to take the Volkswagen. And so she's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. So I stayed and chatted because you can't tell really that I like to chat, can you? I like to chat, people. Give me a microphone. I can talk all day long. So I'm talking to the mechanic, and if I hadn't stayed, we chatted, I think for about 2 hours, honestly, when I should have been recording this podcast, but I'm recording it now. And that's how the whole conversation came up about the value of the car. And I said, wow, that was a great gift, right? By me staying there, talking to the mechanic, because otherwise I wouldn't have known. We would have offed the car for cheap money, as my friend Billy would say. And she really could have gotten a lot more for it. So now it's good. She feels better about looking for a newer car. I feel better about her looking for a newer car. And it's much more positive and hopeful than it was a day or two ago around the car scene in the Fontaine household. Just saying. So what are some signs that you can ask for from Spirit? You can pick a particular sign, right? So when I asked for a sign to know that my intuition was right about buying, it's a Mercedes S600, I will tell you. It's a big car. It costs big money. And when it needs to be fixed, it costs big money. But I love the car, and I'm so happy that I followed my intuition, and Spirit gave me a sign to confirm that my intuition about buying that car was right. So I didn't ask for it in a dream. I just asked for it to be crystal clear, and boy, was that crystal clear. So you can ask for a sign. As I was talked about in the previous episode about the sign of the hawk, the cartoon hawk, right? If you didn't hear that, go listen to episode 2, because I talked about how I was looking for a specific sign and that my guides were going to give me a hawk. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you all about it because I want you to go listen to it. It's a great story. I love that story. So go listen to episode 2 if you missed it. And if you caught it, you know what I'm talking about. So you can ask for a specific sign. My dear friend and colleague and longtime mentor, Colette Reed, one of her signs is dragonflies. So when she and her husband, Mark, were looking for a house, she knew that the right house would have dragonflies. And they were looking at all these houses. They were moving states. They weren't sure where they wanted to go exactly. And they go to this one house, and they didn't think it was the house. But as they were leaving the house, there was the dragonfly. So that's when Colette knew that was the house for them at that time. They weren't in that house for long, but it was the house they needed to be in that moment. So you can ask for signs in nature, dragonflies, hawks, anything like that. I told the story about the butterflies, right? Where I had 125 butterflies on my, did I tell that story? No, I think I told that story in Clubhouse, actually, Friday night, this past Friday. And if you want to hear that story, you're going to have to go to my Patreon and join my membership, because all the podcasts, all the Clubhouse shows from the last year plus live in the Patreon. So if you want to listen to all the Clubhouse recordings, go to Patreon. You'll find that under Boldly Authentic on Patreon. And that's where those live, including a really great episode with the actor Tiffany Haddish, which was a lot of fun. And anyway, so that's all I'm going to say about that. You know how to find them, how to get access to them. They will all be uploaded. My team is working on that now before the end of the month. So if you join this month, you will have access to all of those. And you get access to those no matter what level of membership you sign up for. There are different tiers of the membership, and it's very all the details are there of what you get with each member. So the membership, the starting membership starts at just $5 a month. So go check it out. I would love for you to do that. You can find that on my Linktree through Instagram. There is a link for that there. I believe you can also go to Patreon and Google and search it. You will find it that way, looking up Boldly Authentic with Cynthia Fontaine. And then it should come right up, and you can do the clickety-click, push the button, push that button, put your information in, ding, 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 done, and you're in. All right. So, another funny thing is we were originally, now I'd been looking for podcast names for about 5 months, which I think I shared with you in episode 1. And we had sort of settled on Intuitive Talk, and it felt okay. I mean, I kind of like the ring of it. You know, it is part of what I do, but I felt like it was also a little bit restrictive. And then out of the blue, this week, my team comes up with Boldly Authentic with Cynthia Fontaine. Now, that is me. That is my brand. I am boldly authentic. I don't hold anything back. You know, I give you all I've got. I share my stories. I share, all the knowledge that I've gained over the last 40 plus years. I am boldly authentic, and I am out and about, and I am here to help you, right? With the tools that I have in my tool bag, which are many, I will say. But, what is the main reason why people come to me initially? Well, they come to me for the psychic mediumship, which can look like a psychic reading, but I work in a prescriptive way, not strictly in a predictive way. So I work differently than many psychics do. It's not one, it doesn't make one or the other better than the other. It's just different. And so I work in a prescriptive way where I give homework. And, one of the big things that people often want to know is, oh, when is the love of my life going to show up? And very often there is somebody in the wings waiting, and it's a matter of timing. And I'm actually pretty accurate with predicting time, which isn't common for a lot of people in this field, but I have a pretty good track record of predicting timelines. And, but say you have somebody on your timeline, but then you need to do some work around codependency, right? A lot of us can use some work around codependency because that person, knows how to be in an interdependent relationship rather than a codependent. And when that person comes to your door, who knows? They could be delivering a package from Amazon, or you might meet them at the theater or in the museum or going out on a singles night, wherever. You might be introduced by a friend. And but if you haven't done the work to sort of clear up your past and your wounded self, and that person has, then you won't be ready for them. So I could say, well, you've got a da-da-da-da, they're coming in June. Looks like these are the features, tall, dark, and handsome, whatever. Of course, I'm just making this up. But he comes and goes in June, and you don't even notice him because you weren't ready for him or her. And so I give homework because I, first of all, want you to be your most powerful self. And how does that happen? You don't give your power away. Don't give your power away to me. Don't give your power away to an oracle card reader, tarot card reader, an astrologist. No, you take the information and then you work with it of how it works best for you. That is the most effective and the best way for you all to use information when you are acquiring it from someone who is an expert in their field. And just like in any field, not everybody in this field is an expert. Pause on that one for a second. There are a lot of really talented people out there, and then there are a lot of people who still need a lot of work. Okay, so really go to the best that you can afford that at the time, and somebody who has a reputation, somebody who comes recommended to you. If you know somebody that's had good results using that person, that's a good way to find an intuitive, an astrologer, a psychic, a tarot card reader, anything in the esoteric field, because it can get a little sketchy in this field, just like in any other field out there, where, there are people who are practicing, if you will, who need more practice. They need to go back to school. So that's really all I want to wrap up. I want to have, yes, blah, 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 blah. That's really all I have for you all today in this episode. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you have gained some knowledge, some wisdom. I hope that you're starting to feel a little bit better about your own intuition. If you have been sort of on the fringe about it, not quite sure, is this okay to do? Is this too weird or whatever? No. The answer to that question is plain and simple. No. Intuition is a natural thing that each and every single human is born with. Yeah. Now, does everybody follow their intuition? Obviously not. And some people go against it completely. I've gone against it completely, and every time I have, I get hit with that cosmic 2x4, and man, it really hurts, right? It really hurts. Like the car accident that I shared in an earlier episode. Had I listened to my gut, had I listened to my intuition, then I would have not had that experience. But I didn't, and so I got the cosmic 2x4. In that case, it was a car that smashed my car to bits. Okay? I don't want that to happen to you. So, learn to love your intuition. Learn to trust your intuition. Start asking for signs in spirit. Now, one quick other sort of note here. I recently had a student who asked about, she was asking oracle cards, questions that oracle cards will not answer, right? They do not answer yes or no questions. So I want everyone to know that. And I am going to go into oracle cards deeper in an episode where we'll just talk about oracle cards and tarot cards and divination. But since that was on my mind right in this moment, I wanted to share that that way that I wouldn't forget, because I forget things. My moon is in Gemini. What does that mean? As my colleague Deborah Silverman says, oh, your moon is in Gemini. You're not supposed to remember things. Funny that. Well, what a relief that was. So, and this is how things like astrology and divination can be helpful. For years, I thought not being able to remember things was a deficit. It was a problem. It drove my kids crazy and the people around me crazy. And when I knew that, it was a huge relief. And I came back home from that weekend with Deborah and Colette and Stars and Cards. And I said to my kids, I'm not supposed to remember things. My moon is in Gemini. So that is just who I am. You're going to have to live with it. That changed my life. So again, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I want to thank you so much for listening. And come back to the next show. Come back next week. Join me, subscribe. Hit me up on Instagram. Follow me there. Follow me on all the social media platforms. If you go to my website, you'll see the little icons that you can click, and then you can join me on all of my social media platforms. I would love that. And I would really love and appreciate if you signed up for my newsletter, which is called The Magical Happenings of Cynthia Fontaine. That way you can stay up to date with what's coming up, what's happening. Oh, and speaking of what's coming up, I have, I've already told you about the Patreon, and I have some things coming up that is really exciting. New coaching programs. I'm going to be having some new classes. So if you want to be notified about those things, you're definitely going to want to sign up for my newsletter, The Magical Happenings of Cynthia Fontaine. Now, you will not get a newsletter more than once a week, because it drives me crazy when somebody floods your inbox with like 5 emails a day. Drives me crazy, a little cuckoo. So I will never do that. If you happen to get, say, 2 emails in a week, then it's because there's something going on. And that will not be a regular thing. You will get a newsletter once a week with a little bit of a teaching moment and some updates of what's happening, just so we can stay in touch. But I would love to hear from you on Instagram, on Facebook. Just, say hi. I will say hi back. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. I love you all, and I can't wait to meet you back here again. Ta-ta for now.
This podcast was produced by Alchemy of the Earth Inc. at cynthiafontaine.com. Producer Elise Spizak, Media Relations LJ Rank, Director Ryan Fontaine, and Sound Engineer David Breton. Please subscribe to patreon.com/boldlyauthentic for exclusive membership bonuses.